afternoon and welcome to this week's episode of LevelUp Cyber Live. My name is Tony Bryan. I am your host, and I am so excited today to be joined by Renita Rhodes. Renita, thank you for joining us and welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for asking me to speak. I'm excited
very excited about today's discussion, right? I have talked to thousands of people over the past 7 years, and it always seems that everybody wants to be a SOC analyst or a pen tester, right? Like that's number one thing. I want to hack all the things and use SQL inputs and do all the stuff. But there's a whole world of this sector of cybersecurity that I think goes unmentioned, and people maybe fall into those things rather than intentionally try to find those pathways. So excited to for everybody to hear your story, to where you've got to, and then just sharing some of the best practices. But before we jump in, I'd love to have you introduce yourself, a little bit about your background, and we'll start there.
Okay, my name is Renita Rhodes. I was a information systems major, and I actually moved to St. Louis because I started working at Boeing as a PeopleSoft HR developer. And from there, they kind of was talking about outsourcing. So I went to New Orleans, and that's, basically I did development on PeopleSoft HR financials. And then I had a friend who hit me to IT audit. I never even thought about IT audit at that time because it was just never something that was, was in my purview. Well, by me getting into IT audit, I was working at the USPS Office of Inspector General. That's when I started to see out more of IT. And from me being able to see more than just development, I developed an interest in cybersecurity. Because we audited everything at the Postal Service. We didn't have a cybersecurity audit team, but so we would audit the cybersecurity team. And from there, I went to SLU. I ended up getting a cybersecurity certificate. And then my professor, I had went back to school for cybersecurity management at WashU, and his name is Craig Burkett. He saw something in me, and he was like, "Hey, I think I have something on my team." And that was me working at Edward Jones, and I started in cyber risk management on the cyber risk management team. And from there, that was my way of getting into cybersecurity. Now, with cyber risk audit, cyber risk management is more of you're looking at the governance, the risk, and management of all of cybersecurity. So with this, it's a really broad background. So I was able to see, I worked with the threat and vulnerability management team. I wrote policies for them, procedures for them. I updated policies. I performed assessments on our vendors, security assessments on our vendors, checking their security posture. I also looked at, I was a privacy APL, area privacy leader, or assistant privacy leader for our security team. So we checked to make sure we kept everything together as far as privacy. I also worked on an insider threat program, and I developed a charter for that. And so just with cyber risk management, that's, all the work that I was able to do. I was able to see a lot more. Well, the type of person that I am, my mind is always going. So I wanted to see more of cybersecurity. And I also am in the realm, like everyone else, they tend to think, oh, I want to do cyber, I want to, kind of do like with the SOC, or kind of deal with SQL injections and kind of do some pen testing or ethical hacking. I've taken ethical hacking courses and I enjoyed it because I do have a programmer background. But one thing I've learned, me moving back into audit, but it's in cyber security audit. I was like, I don't really myself don't want to work on like a pen testing or a team where they're trying to re-engineer malware. But I have had that experience. I was able to see it. So with me working in audit, you're able to see everything in cybersecurity. So that gives me pleasure because I'm able to see a lot of different things.
Well, the world is, we were chit chatting before we even hopped on here, just the evolution and advancement of AI and automation tools.
Mm-hmm.
Where like there are a lot of functions within cybersecurity that have the potential, right, that could be automated, right? I know I've heard
Yes.
a lot around automated pen testing.
Yep.
I've heard a lot around like automated, just a lot of the functions that happen in SOC.
Mm-hmm.
Where so
Mm-hmm.
if you're looking for an opportunity or path, right? I think at this, looking beyond just those things into things like audit and IT, and I think we've just, as a country and as a world, have just quite honestly scratched the surface, right? There are so many different layers and guidelines. If you're banking, right, you're doing PCI. If you're healthcare, you're doing HIPAA. You can do NIST standards. There's CMMC. There's all these new, because as the industry grows and more regulations continue to pop up, there's a very bright future. And it's a very hard thing to automate. Policy, procedures, the front end of this stuff. So there's a lot of opportunities, I think, that are out there that people are sleeping on for job. So you shared a little bit about just kind of where you came from. What other spaces beyond SOC and kind of pen testing roles do you think are out there that people should consider or look at for opportunities?
Well, outside of those two areas that, of course, I've identified, because yes, as you said, the SOC, there is some automation going on right now. Anyway, if people are using Cortex XOR, so they're already automating certain stuff. But other areas include, which a lot of people don't think of, if you like cybersecurity awareness training. I don't think anybody could just take any form of awareness training and just use it constantly, because one, you got to keep your students engaged, so it has to constantly change, and that is one area where people can kind of work into cybersecurity. People don't really think about that. They don't think about the education. Then another area is like when I go back and look at different things when I'm doing certain speaking engagements, especially to kids. I let them know, like, okay, you can do stuff with like infographics. You have designers, you have, oh my gosh, I mean, it's like multiple areas, like anything that we're doing in IT, you could do in cybersecurity. You have the people who are involved in development. So they would have been business analysts when I'm going to say growing up in IT, but some of them are still called that. I know they're also like product managers. That's another area people may want to look into, because you have all these tools out here. How are these tools going to become available to organizations to use? They have to be developed. Then there is, of course, you have network security. I mean, everybody should know that. But then, trying to think of so many other areas. I didn't write all of these down. Of course, I was focusing more on audit.
I helped you out a little bit. I dropped there's a link in the chat, in the comments. There's a website. It's called CyberSN. It's a company. They do staffing and recruiting. They don't pay me to say this, but it's one of the best single kind of reference points that I have found for all the different functions that happen within cyber, right? So they list out 45 different roles. It's covering, auditing, governance and risk and compliance. There's cloud security, insider threat stuff, privacy analyst, data privacy, app security, cloud security. It even goes all the way down into things like sales and insurance sales, because that's a whole other world, right? Like,
yes, that's true. That is very true. And I've talked about these before, and it didn't pop in my mind. And I just even spoke about insider threat.
the money that's out there for sales engineers is pretty ludicrous. I mean,
Yes.
I've met quite a few folks that have had some good success in that, in the sales engineer.
Yes,
It's important.
and actually I did look at that once in my time, but I'm not a big salesman, so I don't know if that would be great for me. But I was like looking at the money, but it can't always be about money. You have to enjoy what you're doing. So with identity access management, yes, identity access management is part of that too. And so we happen to have a team that performs identity access management, and then we also happen to have a team that does identity access management audit. And so basically, they're trying to ensure that privileged users are privileged accounts, service accounts, and pretty much everyone or every account that's a part of the organization is used in its systems are authenticated correctly, and they are supposed to be in our network or used. So, um, yes, we do happen to use identity access management, but sometimes, I mean, it could be a small team of people doing stuff.
Yeah, a lot of that, I think they're relying on products like Okta,
Yeah.
others for some of that third party identification. But I know the
Yep.
important part around, especially identity access management, right? Because and this is maybe a great second question or follow up question is like those folks that work with the IAM teams are essential to work closely hand in hand with SOC teams, right? So
Yep.
like if we know that there are 125 people that are supposed to be on our network, 125 users, all of a sudden we have 126 or 27, or maybe we dropped down to 123. Like we should know that there's something there
Yep.
that would trigger in a SOC environment, right? But then would then lean to the IAM team to look into it and mitigate and find out where it is and the vulnerability, and those two work together, right? So
Correct.
I feel like a lot of times there's a lot of folks come into this as like there's this isolated teams, right? SOC does this,
Yes.
they don't talk to anybody else, and
Yes.
they do this and they don't talk to anybody else. Like if something happens,
You
everybody's
have to
going
talk
to
to
have
them.
to come together and do it. And I think where because the sector is so new, there's so many companies that are just starting to build this out, right? So I think the
Hmm.
pressure on identity access management is fantastic because it is the first place most companies start when they start building out security teams, right? Like
That is true.
because you got to know who's getting in, and then
Ye-
it's your policies and procedures of BYODs, and bring your own devices. Like they all integrate with one another. So what how have you seen, or what are some good examples, right, in your own kind of experience of seeing your team work really well with other teams, right, where you get to do cool things? And I
Okay.
think people are drawn to pen testing a SOC because it seems cool.
Yeah.
Or we've seen in shows like Mr. Robot, or we were just talking about Night Agent on Netflix, right, where
Yeah.
she's a hacker in a show. Like that's what everybody sees, but there is parallels between the two. So like if you share some examples of just how you have seen those things integrate and work together.
Okay. So going back to when I worked as a senior security analyst at Edward Jones, what we did, as I said, our team encompassed, we did a lot of stuff. Basically, what the other security teams didn't do, we did. So, like I said, I had to work with our threat and vulnerability management team, and so that at that time, that was it wasn't the SOC, but it kind of was like a SOC when they dealt with the SIM and and all the insider threat tool that we had and some of the other tools that are out there. But so as I said, me work on a risk management team. I worked with them to develop their procedures. I also work with them like to write up some rules within the SIM tool. And because our team once a month, one of us had to be on call. So if there were issues that were popping up, the threat and vulnerability management team had their rules that they were monitoring, but we had ours as well. And so with us being on call, we had to ensure that different issues that may pop up, some of those were dealing with um, accounts, privileged accounts, ensuring the correct people were actually using that account. or it was certain, just basically some access in general. And we had to go through several different tools, and different environments in which we were looking at. And sometimes what we would find is that if we had an issue, we had to investigate it. So of course, with us investigating, we had to work with the threat and vulnerability management team. Sometimes we had to work with the another security team, or we may even have to work with like some of the development teams that were dealing with with some of the infrastructure pieces of it. And every now and then we had to deal with what was called the SOC team there. And so we had to reach out. We had to reach out to to a lot of people, communicate with them, and ensure what we were saying was correct. Because sometimes what we did find, and it happened when one of the weeks that I was on call, I remember going into the office, was like, I think it was about 80,000. I think it was 80,000 alerts that I received, and I had to work that, and they just kept going all day. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I think it was about to the middle of the week is when we figured out what the issue was. Because if someone was getting in, it's one person kind of looking at it, but I kind of picked up on a pattern. And what we ended up finding out, it was a change that was made in the system. So sometimes what you're looking at may not be an actual security event. It's a change that maybe a change to, like, maybe you brought a new system in, and you have to that particular ID wasn't registered, or there's now accessing something that accessing the admin, like maybe it's using like SU or something, and we didn't know that, so it wasn't communicated, but we will end up seeing it, and then we had to reach out. With the insider threat, when I worked on the insider threat charter, I had to work with every director in like the different areas within the organization in order to gather the requirements of what they wanted in the system to ensure that we were able to identify those insiders who may be doing some nefarious activities. Now, while we were in test phase, we did identify a person who was doing something he wasn't supposed to. He was in another country, and you know, I wasn't privy to all of what was going on, but we found someone doing something. And like I said, it's during testing, and they had to let him go.
Struggling to find the unmute button there. So it looks like we had another question. It's a good one here. I think just on topic. What would you suggest are some good resources for risk management, threat hunting, or the auditing side?
Okay, for risk management, I would definitely say the frameworks. So you happen to have the NIST framework. They have the NIST cybersecurity framework. There's the 853. Of course, there are the ISO. Pretty much every framework. I'm gonna tell you. I'm gonna give you a cheat sheet right now. If you look at that NIST cybersecurity management, cybersecurity framework, it lists out all the different frameworks that are used right now by a lot of different organizations, and it's mapped to all of those. So you're able to determine whether these if you're using like ISO, because every organization does not use the same tool, it doesn't use the same framework. You can basically kind of look at that tool, look at that framework to see what the controls that you have in place and how they fit. Some of the other tools as far as risk management, I will say we really use the frameworks. I know right before, it was in 2020, I want to say the 853 was updated to where it also included privacy, where NIST has a privacy standard as well, but they combined them. So that's another area you may look at. Of course, like on the risk side, it's It's not as technical as like with the threat hunting. So with threat hunting, I know that one, I didn't get too much into that. I saw some of that when we were auditing, but with them, what they kind of do is kind of go in. That team is very, very technical. So, and I'm not going to say I just was like, oh my gosh, I know everything now that we did this 3-month audit, but they did use. It's escaping my mind, of course, and right now it's weird. That is no, because I always talk about it. That is the like say, you know how you have the hackers to go out and they're white hat hackers and they try to find issues. Oh my gosh, why is it escaping me?
The
Uh,
vulnerabilities within
yeah,
networks or things. Yeah.
yes, and they're going out there trying to go and they get paid for finding these issues. So some of them they're using some of that as far as a resource. Um, oh my,
Yeah. I mean, I
it's
mean, the thing I would
oh my
add.
gosh, it almost came to me. It's like it's coming and it's leaving.
Yeah. I think the only thing I would
Bounty
add.
hunting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would there's the adoption of frameworks, right?
Yes.
NIST or like in CMMC are becoming more and more prevalent, right? So
Hmm.
those frameworks provide a moment in time and a snapshot where an assessment could be done. And to your point, you would, for somebody coming to outside pen testing, you would be able to determine your known vulnerabilities and mitigate those things. And then there's a certain amount of risk that you would be able to do. And you would have the Ferrari of systems, and then you'd have the Pinto of systems, and there's a risk associated with each of those. But so I would suggest that stay broad and familiarize yourself with the frameworks, right? So you can speak to them. And I generally tell people to stay away from the hyper focused vendor product
Yes.
specific stuff. And not that, and all that stuff is great, but the challenge would be is there's no way for everybody who's applying for roles to really know what each company is going to use,
Yeah.
what tool they have. So you're much better off to understand the concepts. You're much better off to understand the who, what, when, where, why, and how of each of those things. So when you're in an interview or you're asked those questions, you could speak to them and be vendor agnostic, if you will,
Yes.
and have a much better sense of just the concepts that are behind it. And then once you either pick a very hyper focused sector or kind of specialization you want to pick in
Hmm.
cyber, or you dive into the company and that company uses a very specific vendor, that's when I would suggest, like, great, go jump into those tools and learn the ins and outs of those. But it's really hard to
Pinpoint all of
pick
the
one when you
resources.
don't know. Yeah. And everything I've even heard of people, that have been doing this for 10, 12 years, when they change jobs to another organization, it takes them 6 to 12 months just to learn how that organization is doing.
Oh my gosh, yes.
So it's, I wouldn't invest a ton of time up front, especially if you're trying to break in on the
Yes.
specifics. Now, and
Because
there's a
I
lot of great free stuff though.
Yeah, because I've been told that it was like an interview I had with AWS before, and they asked me a question. One of the questions was, well, what kind of framework would you recommend, AWS use, or organization, a private organization, to use? Are they required to use it? And so I was like, yeah, NIST, because that's the first thing I think of, because
Yeah.
most companies use NIST. Well, at that time, I was like, that was my answer, and I'm like, that's my answer. And they're like, well, that's good and all, but no one is required in the private industry to use NIST. So everyone can use a different framework. And just as Tony said, kind of get an understanding of what the frameworks are doing. And I'm not saying you have to be totally like I could take this test and it's committed to memory, because there are so many that are out there. And in my work, I've I've used several. So it just depends on the organization.
Yeah, it's hard, and there's what 750,000 jobs, and there's 750,000 different ways to crack how those jobs would be written and different standards. So it's really
Hmm.
hard to be master of specific things until you really kind of lean in and know where you want to fit within it. So it's tough. I know you've been going at it for quite a few years, right? And you described 4 or 5 different journeys of paths that you've done, and you found at this point have found your kind of niche and sweet spot where you like this IT auditing or cyber auditing, and it makes a ton of sense, and it's such a critical function within an organization, right? You happen to be at Wells Fargo, who's large. I'm always companies like Ed Jones or Wells Fargo, that have offices all across the country, and how are you trying to manage all of those things, because they all have important information, right? Like that gives me anxiety just even thinking about the layers of complication that are associated with that. Or
because you do have to think about the physical security, and especially with the way you have all these branches, and physical security is a huge issue. I'm not gonna say an issue; it's a huge deal, because you have to secure not just the network and the main offices. You have to ensure that you're securing each of the branches. And it's not, with Wells Fargo being the size that it is, I mean, I know it's a large bank, but when I didn't realize it until I put a post out on LinkedIn and said, hey, I'm going to Wells Fargo, and it was like 10,000 people or 11,000 people that responded. And I'm like, what the heck? But I had to think, they're all over the world. So when you think about organizations all over the world, your security has to be good as far as the network here and then in other countries. And they also have branches. And then they also have different laws you have to take into account of what can and can't be exposed. So cybersecurity is encompassing so much, and the risk that you have to think about is vast. I know it's keeping someone up at night. Sometimes it's me.
Even I was confirming that I remember I said this acronym right, but GDPR, right? A Wells Fargo's got to look at international different laws, and the U.S. has very different rules than Europe, and Europe has very different rules than China. And if you're doing business in all those countries, that whole world of auditing and compliance goes even broader. Now you got to have familiarity with international laws and what does this company do. The U.S. seems to be a little bit more generous in our privacy laws than I think other countries are, where they kind of have a tendency to lock things down. I don't know which one's right or which one's wrong, but
I know here, our privacy law is like from 1973, 1975. It hasn't been updated, so so they should probably update it a little bit. We have some new issues that's coming into play now. And over 40 something years. So, we might need to update, but I know we kind of look at the different states where the states are actually creating different laws. So with that,
even in general, our internet laws haven't changed a whole lot.
Right.
The internet has evolved quite a bit. I know a buddy was doing something on Venmo this past weekend and wound up getting, they're changing laws on Venmo and your amounts and your limits, and they want to be more accountable for taxes, and because people are using it for kind of gig economy stuff. And he got pinged because it hit a threshold, like, you're going to have to report this income. Like, whoa, I'm just trying to give my wife money for a bill. Like,
right.
nothing to do with it, right? So it's always seemed strange to me of like what things are specific, like, hey, we're going to take a stance. But especially when it comes down to just internet law and security, we probably need not to go into politics today, but
because I know California, they have the CCPA, but there are several other states that are mimicking the CCPA, which the CCPA mimic the GDPR.
Yeah. It's data protection. We're in the prime time Super Bowl of data theft and identity theft right now with tax season. Pay your taxes. Pay your taxes today if you haven't yet, or file your taxes today. It's tax day. Where we've got a lot of stuff. One more question: what certifications would you recommend that would help somebody in a career in auditing?
Well, what they recommend for auditing, overall, is the CISA. Which is the Certified Information Security Auditor. So that's to basically, show that you're able to audit. Then, of course, with auditing, it came from a financial background. So some people may be they may have they may have the accounting certification. And then there is the certified internal auditor, the CIA. That's one. And then there is the CISM. Some people kind of move into that area. And what that is, the certified information security manager manager certification. So that you're kind of moving into the security. Then there is the CRISC, that is the certified. I know it's dealing with risk, and so these are pretty much what they're kind of using out there within this field. But if you're getting into cybersecurity, you can also get the CISSP, and of course, like with the CISM, it's the professional side of the CISSP is kind of everyone uses it. You can also use everyone uses it. Sorry for flip flopping. Within the cybersecurity field, they're using it there. They're using it in audit as well. Then you can do the Security Plus. That's can get your start within the cybersecurity area. And if you want to since we also have to deal with the laws, you may look at the CIPP, and that's dealing with privacy. And I'm trying to think of any others. Like Tony said, if you want to, within this field, there are so many areas you may look at. There are so many certifications you may look at. Because there are some I just found out about this past year when we were auditing that team. And I was like, I had never seen these these certifications before. So it's so many. You just have to, once you get in, you can focus on the area that you actually want to look into.
Yeah. I always recommend, especially in auditing, a PMP is really great. And ITIL, that project management stuff, because there is a very methodical approach to this. And there's, you're taking bite-sized chunks of a large project and parsing it out, right?
Yeah.
Those type of certs of a PMP or an ITIL help you think through that system and process in which you would run through to have a successful kind of compliance and audit there.
That's true, because the Big Four, they do, I wouldn't say a lot of their auditors did have a PMP.
It's more of just the thinking behind it. I don't think it's in terms of just relevance to specific to cyber. I don't think it's there, but I think it's just the concept of working and the process and approach you're taking is really important to set a foundation, I think, to build off of.
I would also bring in probably Agile and Scrum, because that is also coming into play within our audits. So it's like you said, it's project management. Well, they wouldn't say it's project management, but it's a form of project managing a project. So we have daily stand-ups, like how they do within Scrum and Agile, and they can change things in the middle of the audit. Like we may change our focus on something because we need to look at this area, which those methodologies provide you that capability to do.
Yeah, I know. And I think just even beyond this, it does open up there are tons of accounting firms that have jumped into auditing and IT stuff. Like it opens up a pretty big bandwidth of organizations that you have the ability to go and work with. So, right, we're at 30 minutes and it always surprisingly goes by really fast. So, what advice would you give to everybody to help them level up their career?
Definitely. If you have no background like within cybersecurity at all, I would say focus really on on Security Plus. That gives you an overall view of what is out there in the cybersecurity field. You can look at, as Amisha stated, talk about IAM. You could look at you could kind of look at it really doesn't go into insider threat slightly. You could look at business continuity. It gives you information on there. It gives you I'm trying to think of some of the stuff, some of the assignments I gave my students. Um, it also goes into risk management. It goes into, I want to say, some parts of network security. Yeah, it does that, with the, like, security architecture. I mean, it gives you a full, I wouldn't say a full understanding of what is going on. And then from there, you can focus on the areas in which you want to actually go into. Because, as we said, a lot of people they're talking about the SOC, or they talk about offensive security and, pen testing and threat hunting. But that may not be where they really want to be. They may start there. They're like, oh, that's not what I want to do. Um, you could, like, you can look at network security. That could be another area you may want to look into. As far as what I end up doing on one of my audits, because in college I hated secure networking because of my professor. But what we were having an audit where we're going to look at networks and networks, the actual network security, looking at the firewalls and everything. So I needed to update my skills in that area. So I went to a community college at that particular time just to take some classes. I was auditing the classes, but that's just one area, just to kind of get my networking skills up to date. But I know CyberUp does have training for this area, and they have training for Security Plus. That's another one. You guys may want to look into some apprenticeships if you don't want to go the college route. Of course, there's YouTube. Gosh,
There's
at
so
one
much.
point,
There's so much
yeah,
good stuff out there. It really
yes,
is. And that's where I had a gentleman call yesterday who's like very interested in the program. Like, hey, it's great. It's August, right? Like, it's our next class, and I'm like, but nothing prevents you from doing Cybrary, IT Pro TV.
yeah,
There's so many things out there,
course area,
resources that are out there that you could tap in and go run through a content or curriculum. If you're a great test taker, you can go out and do it your own at very little cost, right? Like, there's, if somebody really is passionate about it, and but there's value in boot camps that you pay. Like, all of it is good, right? I wouldn't say all of it is created equally, because there are bad actors and all of those scenarios that are out there to make a buck, which is, it is what it is, so just make sure you're doing your homework and do your research. And, like, if the goal is to get this, find the best path for you to go do that thing. And then, and if it happens to be us, we welcome you in. Come on in. We'll make sure we take care of you. But, sometimes timing is there. And I know we spend a lot of time, or at least I do, with folks, like, what's your budget, what's your timeline, and, like, how do you like to learn? Like, those are three questions to ask, because it helps me point you in the right direction. And, like, if you're coming at this with a sense of urgency and I need something within the next month, we're probably not designed for that person, right? Like, it's going to take you 5 or 6 months, and it should take 5 to 6 months to a year in any of these scenarios for somebody to get at least a baseline of skills. It's really hard, regardless of what people tell you, that you can go learn this in 4 weeks and be an expert.
yeah,
like,
I see those.
It's impossible to be an expert of 45 different functions, right? Like, so
Yeah.
my last piece of advice, just to kind of tag on with what you said, is, just because your first job might not be the dream job, or the SOC or the pen testing thing that you always envisioned that you wanted to do, get a role within a periphery function within security, or with a different function within security, and get in. Be a good worker, show up, do the right thing, work hard. And that doesn't go unnoticed, right? It doesn't take long to move up within an organization, or move out, or get called by somebody else, right? Like, but get in, get that job, then make an educated decision on where you want to be, and then start to dive into some of your specific certs. And I think that'll serve people better 100% of the time. I don't say 100% on most things, but I'm confident that in that scenario, get a job, get into it, and you'll get where you want to go.
Yeah, I've even seen where people, well, I moved in and out of audit, seen where people actually were in audit, they gained the skills, and then they moved on, and they're within cybersecurity. Some of them may be dealing with on a threat hunting team. So it all depends on the person. And yeah, they learn certain skills there, but they may have had more technical skills, and they just weren't utilizing them. I'm not gonna say they weren't utilizing them, or they may try to incorporate them, but their interest was, I want to be more technical.
Yeah.
So
Well, technical takes time too, right? It takes
it
time,
does. It
investment.
does.
There's nothing wrong with that by any means, but I think the role first, the right cultural fit for an organization that I think wants to invest
Definitely.
in you, those things speak volumes and go a long way, and the rest will fall into place, right? Like there's
Hmm.
again 755,000 jobs in the country. Once you're in, you have the ability to navigate one of those 755,000 jobs because you now have
Yes.
experience. So with that, I want to say thank you for joining us today. It's a great show, great questions from the audience. Appreciate everybody that tunes in and asks questions and makes it engaging. Join us next week. We are on Monday. We're going to have Chris Cockburn with CISA. We're going to talk about pathways into cyber through federal service in the military. Right, a lot of times like there's a lot of I met some really great pen testers and hackers that
Yes.
come from the Air Force and Army, right? Some of your more prominent folks, Mr. Burkett was a federal service guy, right?
Yep.
Craig, that we talked about earlier from Ed Jones. These are all great ways. FBI is struggling to find people. CISA is struggling to find people. Secret Service has a whole cybersecurity bucket. TSA has they're rolling out a huge cybersecurity
Wow.
infrastructure, like hiring people all across the country, giving them vehicles to go do literally auditing and compliance stuff across the country. So
I'm
there's
not
so much
surprised.
opportunity in federal service out there
Definitely.
that nobody knows about. So we're going to dive into that next week. So Renita, I appreciate the time and just the passion you bring to the sector and all you do for not just Wells Fargo, but for your students that you teach. I know you mentor and hang out with tons of folks, youth and adults. So kudos to you for just being an active and advocate person within the cybersecurity space. So
Thank you.
and everybody else, appreciate you tuning in. And until next week, hope you have a great week. And again, don't forget your taxes; it's important. So,
Yes.
you guys have a great day.
Thank you. You too.
I'm trying to find my little clip.